very warm welcome to the esteemed moderator and panelists of the session today. We are delighted to have with us today policy leaders, academicians, and environmentalists who have a vast expanse of knowledge with regards to the ecosystem surrounding the bountiful lakes in Manipur and the most famously known to all, the Loktak Lake. Balipara Foundation is a non-profit establishment based in Assam, promptly taking up conservation and rural livelihood development activities across the 12 Eastern Himalayan states and countries. Our vision at Balipara Foundation is to conserve and preserve the rich natural heritage of the Eastern Himalayas through our experimental framework of rural futures and naturenomics. We envisage a future where conservation is a part of the human fabric and technological innovations reinforcing the principle of naturenomics human development. It is humbling to note the congruence between your expert thoughts and how Balipara Foundation envisions an society with a holistic development battalions ready to take forward its community champions and their efforts to conserve our natural assets. Now, I would like to request my colleague Mr. Sandeep Bora to take over the session and to give an introduction to our regional forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Nitu. So very good evening to my dear respected moderator, panelists, and to all the participants. At first, I would like to introduce you all to the Regional Eastern Himalayan Nationalist Forum of Balipara Foundation. It is a platform that is designed to confabulate upon the rich biodiversity and community conservation practices that has been observed across the Eastern Himalayan capital and countries. It also tries to highlight indigenous issues that has been a subject of global interest, along with the interested relationship that the forest friends communities of the region residing with the ecosystems around. Our regional forums envisions to stand up as a connector to the annual Eastern Himalayan Nationalist Forum that is targeting actions and deliberations fostering towards a new model of growth designed within the new paradigm framework of ecology is economy, and also eventually spreading up our actions across boundaries of nations, ethnicities, languages that will eventually encompass and bring together a biocultural diversity from the snow line of southern China to the sea line of Bangladesh and Myanmar. I would also take this opportunity to welcome our respected panelists and moderator and participants to the first edition of Manipur Eastern Himalayan Nationalist Forum that will spotlight the issue of extended ecological damages incurred to the wetland ecosystems of Manipur, which is triggered by unplanned human activities and cluttered industrial infrastructural development cropping up in close proximity to the biosphere sensitive zones. Now I would like to introduce our moderator for today's panel, Mr. Dhurbajyoti Sahariah. Mr. Dhurbajyoti Sahariah is a professor from the Department of Geography of Guwahati University. Mr. Sahariah completed his PhD thesis entitled as Wetlands of the Brahmaputra Floodplain in Darang District, a fluvio-geographic study in the year 2009 from the same university itself. Mr. Sahariah has published a total of 40 research publications in journals and edited books, which is extensive knowledge on the subject of GIS and remote sensing in natural resource management obtained from the International Institute for Geoinformation and Earth Observation and said in Netherlands. Mr. Sahariah has been fundamental in contributing his expertise to a series of ongoing projects like climate change impact assessment of threatened taxa in the Eastern Himalayan region, regeneration and conservation strategies. He is also a recipient of the NUFIC Fellowship from Netherlands government in 2006 and the Commonwealth Travel Grant in 2005. And he is presently associated to a series of projects undertaken by the Indian Space and Research Institute. So now I would like the moderator to take over discussions from here and introduce our panelists. Mr. Sahariah, you can come in.
Okay, thank you, Sandeep. First of all, I would like to welcome our panelists. Wetlands are one of the most diverse, biodiverse regions of the world, and we all agree that, especially if we talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, then almost 7 of the total 17 Sustainable Development Goals concerns with wetlands. If we talk about Sendai framework of disaster risk management, then it has the priority 3 on wetland resources. So we all agree wetlands are one of the most prioritized ecosystem on this earth. But at the same time, the increasing human intervention on wetlands, the increasing development, and there is always the dichotomy between development and conservation, and leading to that indigenous communities which are once associated with these wetland resources are marginalized, and many these rich ecosystems are on the verge of extinction. So, to discuss this, one of the most pertinent issues of today, especially in terms of Northeast India, we have one of the very rich panelists amongst us today. So, before discussion, I would like to introduce them to the audience. First, Dr. T. Brajakumar Singh. He is currently appointed as a director to the Director of Environment and Climate Change Unit of Forest and Environment Department of Manipur. Mr. Singh has also handed over with the additional charge of nodal officer to a series of other state government assignments like environmental clearance and developmental projects under the Environmental Protection Acts and Rules 1986, impact assessment under rights to fair compensation and transparency of land acquisition, rehabilitation and resettlement, that is social impact assessment and consent Manipur rules 2014, member environmental expert of state level committee for Manipur conservation of Paddy Land Acts 1914, nodal officer for composite water management index, and many more. So I don't want to read out all these things, but he have one of the leading figure in, especially in terms of environment from Manipur. And then we have Mr. Salam Rajesh. Mr. Salam Rajesh is an Imphal-based media professional and currently works as an independent researcher and writer on socio-environmental issues. He coordinates campaigns and advocacy for indigenous people's rights. As an activist, Mr. Rajesh has worked in Loktok Lake Ramsar site for past 20 years, being associated with the issues of displacement of fishers and farmers in the lake area due to human intervention. Activities related to wildlife in the lake area and community participation in the conservation of Loktok and adjoining wetlands. He is currently associated with different activities of fishing community living at Sampu Kampok floating village in Loktok Lake. His focus of present study and interest is on the relationship shared by local communities with their surroundings, including land, forest, and water bodies. He writes for newspapers and journals on socio-economic stories. Mr. Rajesh also associated number of national and international bodies who especially interest on wetlands and wildlife and also indigenous communities of the region. Then we have another speaker with us, Dr. Abhinandan Saikia. Dr. Abhinandan Saikia is an assistant professor at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Guwahati campus. He is associated with the Center for Ecology, Environment and Sustainable Development in the Institute. Prior to this, he has worked with organizations like National Institute of Science, Technology and Development Studies, Worldwide Fund for Nature, to name a few. His thematic areas interest are agroforestry, traditional knowledge system, and common property resources. And from academic point of view, he has a very diverse background from botany. Then he has a degree from Forest Resources Institute of Dehradun, and also a PhD from JNU, that is Center for Studies in Science Policies, CSSP. So with that kind of diverse background, our panelists, I believe that whatever we are looking forward to listen, so we definitely achieve in this discussion. So without wasting much time, probably I would like to straightway go to Mr. T. Brajakumar Singh. Having his long association especially in the government agencies, and he is one of the policymaker not only for the state but also in national level. He has a wide range of experience, and I therefore would like to listen first without putting any questions on him. So what is his view on the present status of wetlands in Manipur, especially around Lakta.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. In fact, I first of all I would like to thank to the organizer for invitation to join this very interesting and important this forum. Anyhow, I will try to share my experiences and my thoughts what about the conservation of the wetlands in Manipur, not only Manipur in northern states, most probably, and the importance of the wetlands. As an environmentalist, what I do feel is that the wetland is a very high, as you rightly mentioned, that is very diversifications and very unique in different natures and amongst the natural resources. But nowadays, what happened? What my feeling is that people are ignoring the conservation practices of this wetland and the importance of the wetlands reducing day by day, and mostly conversion towards the urbanization, the urban development projects towards the wetland swamp areas is the normal practices in everywhere, and not only in I think Manipur. It is transferred to all the states of the nationwide. Based on that, Government of India has also taken the actions on that by having these rules of 2017, as well as the Honorable NGT, National Green Tribunal, has also taken up a series of activity directions on that for conservation of the wetlands, since starting from the Supreme Court order, the Balakrishnan order, that wetlands should be conserved and inventorized and it should be protected. It's well done by the government of India, but the response from the people is too, still we're waiting for that. Having these problems, what my feeling is that, of course, Manipur topographically is surrounded by the hills, and it is just ball-like structure. Having this surrounded by the hills, we have lots of waterlogging area, in fact, by topographically. Uh, with the wetlands also, we have lots of wetlands identified earlier in by the remote sensing record. It was around more than 500 wetlands in that past 100 years back. But very recently, through the remote sensing agency, the environment department doing some collaborative work with the remote sensing agency, they could identify only 119 wetlands within the state itself. Uh, and moreover, again, if we look into the conservation practices of this one well land, it is quite difficult to have conservation practices because some lake, some wetlands has been totally transformed towards the westland, and it is very difficult. It will be quite challenging to convert into the restore into again wetland. So that's why, basis on those things, the feasibility studies and some technical reports, we slowly were trying to rejuvenating all the wetlands, and till now we could have some around 27 wetlands has been identified by the state government, and we are on the process for notification first. Uh, what my understanding is that wetlands, as I mentioned earlier, that the importance of wetlands is reducing day by day. So we should try to focus towards the importance of wetlands. Why we to conserve the wetlands? This is very important thing. How the services of the wetland is given to the people in the civilization, and how ecosystem may be balanced by that wetlands. The microclimatic conditions is maintained by the wetlands. It should be focused towards people to the knowledge. In very simple communication, we should try to reach out to the people, so that because all the community, all that violence is owned by the community. Of course, this is land of government, state government, but owned by the communities. So communities should be, I want to say, enhance their capacity to understand the importance of violence, or the violence service given to them. So, as you know that Manipur, we have the Ramsar site, the Lokta Lake, as you mentioned, that Lokta Lake is one of the important, not only for the Manipur, it is the largest freshwater lake in northern state. But Lokta Lake also is now slowly dying up. The depthness of the Lokta Lake is reducing day by day, and the quality of the water is also deteriorating day by day. The capacity of the water holding is not much properly maintained by this. I'm not blaming to other agency, but it happening now. So the use-wise practices as integrated approach, management practices, share some loophole on that. So this is identified agenda by the state government that how we should focused towards a scientific approach management system. So the government is starting to work with the line departments since last 4-5 years. Of course, we have the authority for the local development authority, but they are mainly for doing this mechanical works and the cleaning and this management part. But we need scientific approach after all. So this is realized now. So with this focusing to the rules of the 2017 Wetland Conservation Management Rule 2017, of course, the state government has formed the State Wetland Authority. After coming to the State Wetland Authority, we have already constituted the technical committee as well as sub-technical committee also with the experts of local peoples. So now we are trying to have integrated management action plan of each and every wetlands for identified wetlands, not for all. We are trying for all, but we are just still now we have already identified only 23 wetlands. We are just on the process of the preparation of the MAP. MAP, as per rule, it has been endorsed by the Government of India. Of course, we have already forwarded to the Government of India for endorsement. And now, slowly, we are in the process for the notification. We have already identified these wetlands and we'll go for notification. After having notification, we'll be having the action on that protection first, because the protection is very much important first. As per theoretically or as per rules and guidelines, there are certain criteria and do's and don'ts, lots of here. But how to make the people aware? This is a very great challenges now. And how to control the encroachment of the wetlands. This is practically it is very difficult to manage those things. So traditionally, how the people do conserve, do protect the wetlands earlier time, and recognizing all those traditional knowledge, we should try to restore it the wetlands. This is a very important thing. And very recently, our department has initiated to restore some of the dying wetlands. A few of them, the Yaralpar is one of the good example. It was totally dry up now in last 5 years. Around 10 years back, it was totally dry up now. But within the last 10 years, we do resonate with the community people participations. They do dig out and they do protect and they do have the water that harvesting pond, and slowly they have restored it. And this is also one of the good examples. So giving these good examples, we are trying to have the restoration of this that wetlands in Manipur now. So my suggestion that first we should inventorize properly the wetlands first, and the revenue department should support to this inventorization, because the all illegal encroachment should be identified, and we should try to remove those things, and the sensitive eco-sensitive zones should be mapped. After having a very good mapping of the eco-sensitive zones, then we will be identify the buffer zone as well as the zoning areas of the wetland itself. After having that, we should have the boundary fence properly, and we should notify as a state importance as well as the national importance. That is the only first step we are targeting from the state government as a nodal agency. And the people, the wetland people, we should think for the wetland people also how they depend on the wetlands, and how their livelihood will be modernized with the conservation of wetland practices. Because we should not forget that they should bring out in the civilization also. We should not keep them as a museum or something like that. We should try to bring out them also in the modernized life. But the conservation should be always with them. So protection, ownership, these are very important things. So slowly, in the catchment area also, I think in my practices, what we are doing exactly that we have already mapped all the identified wetlands. We map the catchment area in different two modes. One is the direct catchment area, and another is the indirect catchment area.
Mr. Singh, I'll come back to on that issue little time later. But you have really raised some of the very pertinent questions regarding, especially the communities, how communities can be managed, or how government should be policies and community work can be linked up. So taking the points from your speech, so I want to go to Mr. Salam Rajesh, who is a long back associated with communities. So, sir, what is your idea about communities and wetland communities? How wetland communities, especially in Loktak, around Loktak, evolved over time, and what is the present challenges according to you?
So, basically speaking about Loktak, uh, I can talk of many things. Uh, Loktak, like you are saying, it's a Ramsar site and is one of the largest freshwater lake in Northeast India. And within Loktak, there's about uh, 1,000 population fishermen living in this floating village. And all around the lake, uh, around 50,000 people depend directly on the fish resource of the lake. But going back around 20 years back, uh, there's been a lot of issues with Loktak Lake. First major issue was uh, because of the Loktak hydroelectric power project. For this, and barrage called Itai Barrage was commissioned in 1983. So problem with Loktak began since 1983. Because of this barrage, uh, Loktak and some of its associated wetlands were converted into one single water body. Because for the hydro project, they have to maintain a water level at 768.5 meter constant water level. So at that level, uh, many of the wetlands that were there earlier, uh, many of the wetlands that were uh, which you can one could see during, especially during the monsoon. There were separate small wetlands around Loktak. These were all merged into one water body. So now when you're talking about Loktak, we see just one water body. And people will say this is Loktak. But if you ask me, I would say that no, this is Loktak plus many more wetlands, which has been converted into one big water body. And because of this hydro project, a lot of issues have come up. When you're talking about biodiversity, this project, and especially I'm talking about this type virus of the hydro project. It has caused uh, abrupt decline in many species, including migratory fishes and migratory water birds. And then during the past 15 to 20 years, a lot of these aquatic plants, water plants, which people use to harvest for food and for sell in local markets, they have started disappearing. And one of the major issues during this past several years has been question on displacement of this fishing community and farmers in the peripheral areas. And there has been also some few uh, legal issues in Manipur High Court, and there's one or two issues in Supreme Court also concerning with displacement of humans. On one hand, we have issues of displacement of humans. On the other hand, we have issues of displacement of wildlife. So uh, currently, for the past 15 to 20, it's almost 23 years now that I have associated with the fishing community. And uh, one of the most prominent issue that we are facing all the time is uh, whenever government of Manipur, whenever government comes up with a scheme or a project concerned with Loktak, the planning is top down. It's a top down model. So as a process of that project, communities are nowhere there. So every time a project comes in, uh, there's always conflict of interest between government and community. Community, I'm talking about both fishing community and the farmer community who are living around the lake. So in addition to issue of displacement by the hydro project. Now we are talking about fishermen struggling to survive because uh, this decline of migratory fishes. Migratory fishes come up from the Chinmay Ravati in western Burma through Manipur River, and it's found in Loktak and adjoining wetlands like Whitehall. We have several wetlands around the Loktak Lake, and uh, since 1983, when Itai Beres blocked these migratory passes, so these migratory fishes have almost declined. 10% of the migratory fishes have declined in Loktak Lake. And because fishermen community depend entirely on this migratory species for the food and for earning money and all. Now, because of uh, this decline in fish resources, they are having a lot of issues on livelihood.
So before coming back to you, I want to hear a little bit from Professor Abhinandan Saikia. Professor Saikia, I know that you have been long work with especially the indigenous communities and also work with wetland related issues. So with your academic background, how you want to see this today's discussion? I want to have a few thoughts from your end. Yeah.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Manipur Foundation organizers, for giving me an opportunity to be a part of this important forum. Thank you, Dr. Dhurbajyoti, for allowing me to speak regarding the issues on wetland, and of course, the interactions regarding the indigenous knowledge system. Well, when it comes to wetland, it's a topic which has always interested me because being an ecologist, I see it as an entity which has certain interconnectivity. Because when you talk about wetland, if you remember, there is a two word that represents wet and land. That means there's a wetness, there's a land. So hydrosphere and then lithosphere combination. So one way, if you look into if you try to look into that entity, it is not something about a particular one component, but it is trying to talk about the interconnections between different layers. So having said that, it is also called as wetlands are also considered to be the kidneys of an ecosystem. Now, when you look into the word kidney, if you see ourselves, our human body, what is the function of a kidney? Kidney is basically for osmoregulation, kidneys for filtration, kidneys as for cleaning up the process. So similarly, the ecological aspect of the wetland is also about the cleaning purpose, and also at the same time maintaining the harmonical conditions of the particular system. Now, having said that, when I look into the perspective of Loktak, especially what interested me is that Loktak many a times in government records also has been defined as a lake as well as a wetland, and that interested me further. Because if you look into the technical term of a lake, especially in India, hardly you get any right definition regarding a lake. What is a lake actually? And because many a time the lake has been confused for a wetland, and wetland is also confused for a lake. And in fact, if you see also the provisions of Government of India, especially for different schemes, I think Sri Brajakumar ji is also there. There is a slight confusion also on the National Lake Conservation Plan and National Wetland Conservation Plan. So many a times what happened when you're trying to release the funds for conservation purpose, there is a sort of an ambiguity in that particular term, that how we consider this as an entity, whether it is a wetland or whether it is a lake. Now, coming to the indigenous system, which is connected with the wetland, if you look into Loktak from a Ramsar site, the criteria number 9, which actually talks about that 1% of the population will be supported it should be supported 1% of the population, which is a non-avian species. If I have to calculate this, if I have to understand this, and if I have to say that it's for human beings, then yes, it is actually there is a knowledge system that need to be also looked as a priority, because Ramsar Convention also talks about wise management of the ecosystem. Now, when you say wise management of the ecosystem, that wiseness do not come from something from modern education. The wiseness comes from traditional ecological knowledge, because when you talk about indigenous system, there's a wisdom. So that word wise is very nicely being put when for the first time the convention was held in Iran in 1972. So that wise comes from a word from wisdom, and that traditional ecological knowledge needs. Now, when it comes to indigenous knowledge system, if you look into the incorporation, how they contribute for wetland management, yes, of course, now due to the factor like globalization, urbanization, and what we call as modernization, these are some of the factors which we cannot avoid because it has entered every layers of the society. But at the same time, we always seek for solutions. When you talk about any natural problems, we always seek out for something which is related with our traditional roots. So now how to bring out these traditional roots so that it can be synchronized properly and it can be actually percolated into policy piece matters. These are some of the challenges that is coming out today in every sphere. Though it is, whether it is in Manipur, whether it is in Assam, you know about a Deepor Bill in Assam, which is also another Ramsar site. You have Rudrasagar in Tripura, which is another Ramsar site. So all of these Ramsar sites are facing problems. So we have to fight this issue because these are the issues, not something that to be dealt with a linear frame of understanding, but with a holistic framework where the incorporation of the modern science versus the traditional knowledge system need to be parallelly understood, given the priority, and finally coming to a congruence in which we talk about a knowledge which is co-produced, a knowledge which is co-produced from both the management system. And then at some point of time, we can think about the issues of sustainability. Because I recently also came to know, because few of my students are also working from Manipur. At some point they worked in Loktak. The recent 2 years back, one dissertation came up which is very interesting, is that now fishermen are using, if I am not mistaken, please correct me, Mr. Rajesh, you are also there, that they're using LED lights during the night time for fishing. Now this is a concern because traditional wisdom do not allow LED to be used in the Loktak Lake. Now, because you need a production, you need something to be feed your, I understand there's a basic need for getting your money, getting your food on time. But if you are trying to go for using LED bulbs at night time, you are actually, first of all, violating the ethical rights of the fishes. Because if I talk about in terms of ecosystem understanding is not only meeting the anthropocentric needs, it is also about the importance of biocentric needs. That means you are also giving the importance of fish productions. Because if you're lessening the fish production, tomorrow there will be a problem for other pre-predator analysis, which will actually also take away your benefit as in wetland. And also at some point, although already already it is in the Montrex record, and I believe that if certain intervention is not being done correctly at this juncture, I think things will not be in a correct shape. So I think immediately we should look into this perspective that how night fishery business can be at some point be avoided, because it is not allowing anything to be put across in a sustainable thought process. So I would not go further because there are a lot of questions would be coming up, and I think already Mr. Salam has given an idea regarding the understanding of the community's connection with the Loktak Lake. I remembered even the dance of Meitei dance, because we come from social science, and even the dance nuances are, if you look into the way how they dance and how they move, it's about the deer of that Shanghai deer, which actually found in Kebuz and Lemjo Park, the way how it moves, the way it's very delicate. And if you see to it, why it is moving like that, because it walks on Fumdi. So that delicacy and that the way of delicateness and that the way how it is being represented also in the cultural memories of the community as a dance representation. I think it's a strong case in which community's understanding is there, but how we took forward, because given the challenges of globalization, that is something we need to discuss in a more elaborate manner.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Saikia. Really, you have set up the momentum of this discussion. So coming back to Brajakumar Singh. So whenever we talk about Loktak Lake, there is a question of land use change, and especially with the help of shifting cultivation. Due to widespread shifting cultivation, it has detrimental effect on as the research suggests. So what is your view on that? How the land use in surrounding region is being changed, and why it is so, and how it has detrimental, or is there any connection between the Loktak sustainability?
In fact, it is a different entity. why I'm telling like this, the Loktak Lake, the catchment area, in fact, it is the southern part and the distant part is some catchment area, in fact. When we map for a catchment area, we are trying to have the indirect catchment area first. What are the influence zone? So after having the proper analysis on the influence zone, what are the factors that disturbing the wetland? This is a very first identification and first exercise for us from our side. So Loktak itself, it having two problems. Within itself, one problem, and the outside the influence zone having some pressure also. There are two impact. Loktak is more having problem from the within itself, because we that in the name of developmental process we have already commenced that Loktak project scheme, the NHPC so far called. Early it might be in a proper shape, it might be in the good shape, but after having long time without any having post environmental impact assessment, I should not say that it is very going in good manner now. It may be good for the that energy production, or it may be good for the other byproducts, but it may be defect to the impact to the Loktak lake itself. It may be having some that problem with the within lake itself. So we should have a proper environmental impact assessment both pre and post. We should not forget these things. So if we have the proper post-environmental impact assessment of the NHPC projects or any projects developed in the within the Loktak itself, we can check on that. So this checkpoint is lagging behind from the our government side. I'm not blaming to other agency, but what my as a scientist, what I feel is that like this. And the catchment, regarding the catchment area, of course, we have in the shifting cultivation as a culture, traditionally culture for the hilly based peoples. Of course, we know that. But now they have also modernized. Not much we are not able to blame whole things to the responsible of the traditionally the village tribal peoples, because they have already always modernized, trying to modernize also. The shifting cultivation doesn't have much problem nowadays. In fact, this is a changing pattern now, because they have changed their traditionally agriculture pattern also from agriculture to horticulture now, and then they have shifted some that agrochemical said the economic plantations they've started, so not much in the paddy cultivation. So the siltation problem from the catchment area is somehow reducing now, but the lagging behind is that we cannot we are not able to bring out the quantumization of the siltation, how much silt is coming from the catchment area. This is lagging behind from our side. Of course, we are starting now. We are only trying to install the measurement of this quantification of the silt coming from them. But that's why I not fully blame to the sibling cultivation for the Loktak problem. So, but I should say that within the Loktak itself, the problem is very much increasing. So, for example, I will take some example for the say, tourists who are coming for the tourist to Loktak Lake. We are not controlled at all. How much capacity of the tourist people, we should check on that also. We should make the tourists should not control Loktak Lake. We should control the tourist. This is the opposite now, it comes. So what happened, the tourist control Loktak now. They will come and there is no any restriction, they will stay away and they will do anything and the instructions. So this is also one thing. Another issue is that the population within the Loktak is we should check it time to time, because the tremendous increasing of the population within the Loktak is having the problem creates now. How they manage their sanitations. This is one of the issues. How the eutrophications come up, eutrophications of local water quality, how it increasing up. Due to the increasing of population, many things is coming up now, the pollutions, and how they bring up the commercial practices, like homestay, the restaurants, and this, in the name of tourists, they establish a lots of pollution leading, polluted leading activities. So my feeling is that the earlier, before commencing of the Loktak Lake project, yes, Loktak Lake was a current water that time. The silt was removed that time. It is some flowing there. But now they totally ban to manage the water level. So silt is always that increasing now day by day. And the depth, the water holding capacity is reducing day by day. This is the main problem now. And eutrophication by draining of the 16 urban drains in within the Loktak itself. So we should check these things also. Of course, we are taking one project for a Nambul project. That Nambul is one of the that major source for the urban waste draining to the Loktak Lake. We are just taking up one project under the NRCD, the National River Conservation Program. After having the training, international diversion of this the Nambul River, then I think some sanitation also will be that good condition. You were right to mention that Mr. Saikia was mentioned that he was recalling about the government guidelines of the NPCA and that wetland conservation plan as well as the lake conservation plan. There's quite confusion on that also. Earlier, that lots of work has been done in Loktak Lake itself. We understand that, but that time the guideline is, I think, that guidelines is need to be re-examined on that time. They are mainly focused towards the cleaning of the fumes, cleaning of the floating masses only. They are never try to improve the water quality. So that's why the fumes, that floating mass has been purified, and that their growth is rising day by day, increasing. How the nutrient of the water quality has been increasing day by day, and these are some issues on that. So until unless we didn't check, we didn't bring down our water quality in that good quality, I think Loktak problem not be solved at all. And the controlling of the population within Loktak itself is to be checked. This is the first foremost priority on that. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir. You have rightly figured out some of the basic needs, especially what I figured out from your speech that there are a lot of need for good academic work, actually, or some background work is before planning. Actually, proper scientific facts need to be figured out. Only then we can plan a better planning for the Loktak region. So I'll come back to Mr. Abhinandan Saikia. So we have a very huge pressure on the wetland ecosystems. Okay, so how you want to revert this pressure, and what is your strategy? How you want to comment on that, Mr. Saikia?
Let me start with an academic question.
Yeah.
That who do not wants to have development?
Yeah.
We all, as a human being, if you look into the understanding in our own understanding, there is a tendency for development in each of us. Like, for example, even the goal what we have just now placed in front of the entire world is also about development.
Yeah.
But we're careful about, we're talking about sustainable development. That's one word that has made a difference in the trajectory of development. Now, when it comes to the issue of the ecosystem like Loktak, many a times what happened, as I was telling you, that wetland, the entity wetland always is of interest to me because if you look into the ecosystem per se, in understanding of that, there is something called lotic and lentic ecosystem. And lentic ecosystem are those ecosystems which are considered to be still waters or stagnant waters, where at some point lakes, ponds, and other entities are also there, and many a time wetlands are also being classified as lentic ecosystem. Whereas in case of lotic ecosystem, you have these rivers, flowing rivers. Okay, you have streams, you have springs. So these are two categories we generally see it. But you know, the problem with the wetland is that wetland is an amphibian character. Like, you know, it is called as a wetland, but as I was telling you, it is also called as kidney of the ecosystem. So if you are trying to confine wetland within a boundary, there you are actually underestimating the very epistemological concept of wetland, because wetland, if you look into it, it is being connected by different streams and at the same time by a main river. Like, for example, if you're talking about a wetland like Dipor Bill in Assam, it cannot be considered as a huge body just like a lake. Why it is a wetland? Because it is connected with tributaries like Bhorolu and other rivers from the city, and at the same time it goes out to the river Brahmaputra. So one way, whenever you see Dipor Bill having a water surge, you can try to understand that there is also a sort of a surface level rise in river Brahmaputra. So it is one way indicating. I was looking at the data of Loktak. In fact, Loktak is a very interesting insight. But we are just confining ourselves to Bishnupur district and saying, okay, this is Loktak. But Loktak watershed, if you look into it, it has connection also with with another foreign country like Burma. Okay, you have a river called Longling towards the south, okay, through which a Loktak is also connected. And by the time it entered Burma, it becomes a Manipuri river. It has been called like in that context. Now that river goes to the Bay of Bengal. So decision about Loktak is not something to be made only locally, but there has to be a local action, no doubt. But it has to go to a global order. That's something we need to have a more governance model that need to be looked when we're talking about Loktak Lake. We need more sort of actors coming from different walks of life. Let me tell you, of course, it's not only about the academics, but also academics, government, and at the same time, developmental organization groups, different think tank groups, and practitioners. So come on board with the confidence of the traditional knowledge systems of the indigenous community, because I have a hunch, because this is a problem that is happening in many of the wetlands especially in Northeast, is that under the growth of modern civilization, which you call real estate development, we try to develop. And in fact, from Manipur also, if Mr. Sir is there, Mr. Brajakumar Singh is there, I came to know recently that there are small rivers in Manipur town, like in Imphal town, now which is actually getting a lot of problem of waste. They can move out. Okay, and earlier that was confined only to Guwahati. We have river like Bhorolu, we called it like Black Sorrow of Guwahati, because it's just like a Damodar river in Bihar. But now in every Northeast, this is a problem coming up with the coming of waste management issues, with development issues, with urbanization issues. So once we see to this problem, these are actually blocking. These are actually blocked to the whole flow of the ecosystem, because ecosystem is a process. You cannot simply come and block it, because it will try to try to have an overspill effect on entire watershed issues. So this is something need to be looked into it. Now, you raise a point, if I'm not mistaken, you raise a point also on the issues of those shifting cultivation, if I just come across. See, shifting cultivation, as Sir has also pointed out, now the government of India's attitudes to shifting cultivation is understanding through a landscape mode, which was earlier confined to only to agriculture, but now it is being understood to a landscape mode. And at the same time, there are a lot of innovations going on in the entire cycle of shifting cultivation. Now, what has happened? The cultivation cycle of shifting cultivation has lengthened because of introduction of different horticultural department effort, which at some point is arresting soil erosion. At the same time, also on the other hand, lengthening the period of fallow cycle. And besides, if you talk about just wiping out shifting cultivation from the memory of traditional communities, then the very traditional communities' identity will be at stake, because entire seasonal calendar of the agriculture community of shifting cultivation is actually linked with certain festivals, certain marriage, certain, it's a traditional package. So you cannot simply say that, okay, let us stop shifting cultivation and let us think about it. The answer has to be within the shifting cultivation, but you are not going to change the pattern of the shifting cultivation. It's like, for example, that I'm wearing a t-shirt, I'm wearing the same t-shirt, but tomorrow I'll be having different prints, but the size of the t-shirt will remain the same. So that particular understanding has to be there, that within the system, we have to find a solution. Now, coming to the innovation perspective, which also is linked with the community, that, okay, now we are talking about a system, we also are being aware about the whole developmental trajectory coming us, knocking us at the same door and saying that, okay, open the gates, because you have to be entrepreneur, you have to meet the needs of the area. So your some of your products coming from Manipur has to be in the global market. Very good. It's a good entrepreneur way. Everyone wants to do it. But now, how we do it? How we do it? As Sir has pointed out one very interesting point, I liked it. He said, it's not that we are going to control Loktak Lake. We are going to control the tourists. That's where the whole stake is. The idea about coming up with a natural ecosystem and placing it in front of the world is not like just opening the gates, but having a gate on the basis of the formula of osmosis. Semi-permeable membrane. That means at some point of time, there has to be certain sort of regulation. That doesn't mean that you are stopped, but it's like a speed breaker, so that there is a flow, but the flow is in such a way that it do not disturb the very decorum of the lake or the wetland called Loktak Lake. Now, coming to the innovation perspective, if you talk about the communities per se, whether how they will be maintaining their identity in long run, yes, it is a question, because of the different aquatic chemistry happening in and around the wetlands across the world, say it in Diporbil or say it in Loktak Lake. many of the fishing technologies have become obsolete. Many of the fishing technologies have become obsolete, and I feel pain when I see the fishing technologies of the fishermen saying that our technologies have become obsolete, now it is no use. Then I asked them, Dada, why did you make this fishing technology? What made you make this fishing technology? Well, like once upon a time there was a fish which used to be coming up in this ecosystem, but now it is lost. And for catching that fish, we used to make this technology. Now you see, the traditional ecological knowledge is embedded there. Problem is that sometimes traditional knowledge is oral. We do not record it. But how you record it? Through the tools. So I think at some point of time, of course, sir is from the government side. Of course, you'll be able to throw much light into it. I think there is a need in every wetland, especially the Ramsar sites, that there has to be a living museum for the community as well, with their tools on a particular understanding, that showing that connection of the tools with different species available once at a time in the past, and how certain tools are still being going on. So that will also be a catch point in understanding the whole developmental trajectory of a wetland in connection with not only with the local understanding, but also giving us an example that look, there is a lake called Loktak in the eastern part of India. Giving an example, at the same time, it has also certain responsibilities towards the transnational issues, as I was telling about the Burmese connection. So that is a particular flow that we need to really understand it. My submission to this whole question is that let us not say that we have to reach to a solution, but let us say that we have to reach to a pulsating balance. Pulsating balance. That means if you are talking about a solution is just a product, you are selling it. Okay. And every product has an obsolete value. So why do think about certain thing which has an obsolete value? Rather think it as a process that need to be continued.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Saikia. So I want to go to Mr. Brajakumar, especially when we talk about wetlands. One of the major threat to the wetland ecosystem is the hydrological alterations, and small or big, we have a lot of hydrological alteration in the catchment areas. So especially in terms of, we have already some points come up in this discussion regarding the hydrological dams, hydro dams. So what is your view on relation between dam and our Loktak sustenance?
See, I will not talk only for the Loktak, like dam in respect to dam or as an environmentalist. From my personal view, I will not encourage for the mega dam in the north.
Yeah.
As per this profile of the ecological as well as the geotectonic profiles. So, but we should develop some check dams and small dams for maintaining of the e-flow. E-flow is very big challenges nowadays, because all the springs has been dry up now. Around 47 springs of the 47% of the total springs has been dry up in Manipur state, as per my analysis. So the flow, e-flow, the rejuvenating of the springs as well as the maintenance of the e-flow of the streams is to be checked by only the having some check dams, small dams. I should encourage on that, but for this mega dam, I will not encourage on that. And then lastly, I would like to focus some approach, some government side approach, because that Mr. Saikia has rightly mentioned that not only for the scientific study, we need some strong and committed approach from the government side also. It is very rightly mentioned that we need a strong commitment from the government side, because the research and the policies should go together. It is not separately. Research is separate and the policy is separate. It is not do like this. Because till now, what my feeling is that when I doing the research, then the research was very best priority. When I came back to the platform in the government employee, I just do for the policy is very important thing. So policies should be research based and research also policy based. It is very interconnected. So what as per in my domain, I am also another officer for the climate change in the state. So in the practice of the climate change action plan, what my practice is that we are preparing the action plan for every sectors, including the wetland also, but starting from the top-bottom approach and the bottom of the approach. That both the way we are planning for the integrated approach management. But what my feeling is that the adaptation capacity should be enhanced at any context. for the people also, for the government sector also, for that scientific forum also, for the specific sector, we should develop, we should try to enhance the adaptation capacity. Until unless the capacity is enhanced, it is not possible to bring all those things. And my last ambition, as a nodal officer for the Wetland, I'm trying to create the Wetland institution so that we can have that very sound and conservation approach for the Wetlands. So Wetland institution, we are trying to have the Wetland institution very soon. I think we'll have this type of institution will come up in Manipur. So for the Sek Dam is encouraged, and for the Mega Dam, I'm not sorry for that. I will not support the Mega Dam.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Singh. So with this, we are almost end of this today's discussion. But I am very glad that we have some of the very eminent speakers today, and they have thrown light on the very pertinent issues regarding the wetland in the region. And what I feel that so one of the very pertinent issue Mr. Singh has pointed out, that there should be linkage between policymakers, government side, as well as researchers, as well as the community. This triangle should be there. And one more thing, one of the major fault from the, I say with fault from the academician's point of view, everybody want to reinvent the wheel. So we should not go back to reinventing the wheel, and there should be some common platform, okay, where our knowledge should be shared. Whatever we have gathered, that should be shared to the community, so that knowledge, once we share, then we can make a more knowledgeous community, and it have help us to take better decision. So with this, whatever point we gathered today, whatever lessons we learned today, I believe that Balipara Foundation will take note of this and will place these notes in their policies, and will take this to some action research in the coming days, so that with the help of both government side, academician, as well as indigenous community, with the help of this triangle, we can make a better society, better sustainable society for the especially with the Loktak communities. I believe that with this, I once again thank you all for sharing their beautiful thoughts. And over to Sandeep if he wants to make some concluding comment. Thank you.
Thank you, my moderator, and also my panelists. It was really an informative session for us, and our objective for this forum has come out really well. We are looking for, combined action in terms of conserving this wetland ecosystem, not only in Manipur but across the Western Himalayas. And we are definitely enlightened by your points, and we had really some good points that can be turned into actions in the future days. And saying that, I will say thank you to all of you once again for joining in, giving your valuable time with us, especially Dhurbajyoti in this situation. Thank you very much. Abhinandan sir, thank you. Mr. Brajakumar Singh, thank you, sir, for your valuable time. I know you have a meeting after this. I know it is really tough for us. And also thank you, Mr. Rajesh. You have been lost for some time, but then at last you can join in. Also, and thank you the entire Balipara team for joining in as participants. We'll see for good works and good collaborations and really some on-ground actions in our near future. Thank you once again.
Okay, thank you very much. Looking forward to see you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.